Deep in the United Arab Emirates, a massive steel artery stretches across 406 kilometers of desert, moving 1.5 million barrels of oil daily. On paper, this project is a geographical paradox. The UAE already possesses highly active export terminals inside the Persian Gulf. Building a massive land-based pipeline to a secondary coast on the Gulf of Oman seems redundant. Yet it cost $3.3 billion and a coalition of global contractors to forge this 48-inch steel pipe through the sand. The map tracks a path that ends in Fujairah, carefully avoiding the 33-kilometer-wide stretch of water known as the Strait of Hormuz. For the Emirates, this isn't about day-to-day efficiency. This infrastructure is a multi-billion-dollar insurance policy against a single geographic failure. This satellite view captures the Strait of Hormuz. Historically, this narrow corridor has handled over 20 million barrels of oil daily. That volume makes this tiny pinch point the singular jugular vein for the global energy ecosystem. In late February 2026, the underlying fears that motivated the UAE's bypass pipeline became a reality, and the security of the waterway failed. When a primary geographic choke point is compromised, the resulting shockwaves instantly bypass local borders and threaten the stability of the global economy. The crisis began with direct kinetic threats. Missiles and drums targeted at least 16 cargo and energy vessels in the Persian Gulf and adjoining waters. But physical barricades were not required to stop global shipping. The actual mechanism of closure was a financial choke, triggered when the cost of marine war risk insurance spiked by 1,000%. This is the mathematics of a blockade. Insurance for a $250 million tanker voyage used to cost $625,000. Within days, that premium leaped to $7.5 million per trip, forcing major shipping companies to withdraw. The route became unviable. In modern trade, an ocean strait is effectively closed the moment global insurance markets refuse to underwrite the journey. The physical consequences are clear. Maritime traffic plummeted from an average of 80 daily oil tanker transits to just 1 or 2. This forced an immediate reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, a detour adding 12 days and burning millions in extra fuel. This systemic failure stranded over 20,000 international seafarers, leaving them trapped in a contested zone. When the transit through a 33-kilometer gap fails, the impact radiates across every ocean. A localized security risk turns into a systemic global supply shock. Shifting focus, this brings us to India, a nation that operates without a physical escape valve like the UAE's desert pipeline. India's structural vulnerability is significant. The country imports up to 88% of its crude oil, and roughly half of those imports historically relied on Middle Eastern corridors. Sustained disruptions at the strait could add between $56 billion and $64 billion to India's annual import bill. This jump in baseline energy costs cascades into domestic inflation, affecting supply chains, transport logistics, and retail prices. Without infrastructural redundancies, a domestic economy is held hostage by a distant geographical choke point. India cannot physically build a 400-kilometer steel pipeline to the Middle East. To protect itself, it must construct policy pipelines instead. The first step is a financial bypass. India must establish a domestic insurance framework to end its reliance on European maritime insurers during geopolitical crises. The energy bypass involves diversifying crude sourcing toward West Africa and the Americas, while accelerating the domestic nuclear energy mission. This is supported by a logistical bypass, expanding the domestic shipping fleet to gain strategic control over the transport of its own energy. The ultimate lesson of the 2026 crisis is that absolute logistical efficiency is a vulnerability. True national security requires an alternative route, whether that is a pipeline buried in the desert or the strategic resilience to survive when the primary routes close.